Hi, this is Ryan with Rhyme Joe Codes, and in this video, we're talking about the VLOOKUP function. Before we get started on the function itself, let's look at the data. Now, the V in VLOOKUP means vertical, and what that means is it wants to search vertically down a column for our search key. So then our data has to be set up more horizontally. Or in other words, each row is its own record. So this is record 1's row, record 2 row. And what this does is it lines up our IDs in a single column. Our first names are in another column. All of our last names are in a third column, so on and so forth until we get to postal code. So this is the general way that data needs to be set up for a VLOOKUP. All right, so let's jump into the function. Click over here next to our ID label. We're going to type in equals and the function name of VLOOKUP with the open parentheses. I'm going to click on that question mark, and this is the formula help. And it shows us what parameters the VLOOKUP is expecting. The first parameter is search key, and that's the item that we're looking for. So in our case, we're looking for an ID, and all of our IDs are integers. So we can just type in a number, and I'm going to type in the number 1. The range is where our data can be found. And so our range, since we're looking for an ID, the range has to start with the column that contains your search key. So we're going to start with column D. And I like to use the entire data set in this particular case, so I'm going to go from D to K. Now, if you'll notice, our data doesn't actually start until row 3, so I'm going to change the start row to 3. And so this is what our range is. Our range for this is D3 through column K. Now we're asked to give an index, and the index, as you can see, I put these indices up here as reference. The index is the column reference, well, it's our return column for the VLOOKUP function. But the index is relational to our range. So the first column in our range is number 1, the second column is number 2, all the way down to our last column. And so in our case, we have D is column 1, E is 2, all the way to K, which is index 8. And so we're wanting to return our ID, so that's column 1. And so we're going to have an index of 1. Now the last parameter is actually optional. That's what the brackets mean. Is sorted is a Boolean, which means it's either true or false. And it has a default value of true. And that's why it's optional, because if you want to accept the default value, you don't have to give the value in the function because it has a default value. And you can see our ID column is sorted, so I'm just going to type it in so that we know that there's 4 parameters. And I'm going to come back to that in just a second. So we've clicked enter, and that is what a VLOOKUP return looks like. It's just going to give us a cell value for the cell that we pointed out. What did we point out? Well, we're saying search column D, starting at row 3 for the number 1, which just happens to be D3. And we want you to return the first column in our range, which is D. And so it's going to return that same spot of where it found our search key. So it's going to return the same row with the index number that we give it, and in this case it happens to be D3, and so it returned the value number 1. Now to show you maybe where you can see a little bit better, I want to take away this hard code for our search key, and I'm going to use a cell reference instead. All right, so now we're going to use whatever is in B1 as our search key. Well, there's nothing in there, so it's telling us that it couldn't find it. So now I'm going to give it the number 1, and we get the number 1 again. 2. All right, so what if we put 6? All right, we're getting 6. So what's happening is it's searching this column. Once it finds our search key, so the number 6, it goes to index 1, which is the same spot, and it returns that value. Okay, that's pretty simple. So what happens if we ask for a number that's not in our ID column. So let's say we ask for number 100. Well, it returns 10. Why did it return 10? Well, that's because of our default value here of true for is sorted. So this column is sorted, so you think that you would automatically just put true. But let's look at what the parameter actually means. So the is sorted, which again is optional, indicates whether the column to be searched, the first column of the specified range, is sorted. In which case, now this is what we have to pay attention to. Since it's sorted, the closest match for search key will be returned. So that means if it cannot find our search key, it's not going to say, hey, I couldn't find it. It's going to return the closest match to it. And so even though we were looking for number 100, the closest match would be the last match of our record set. So that's the number 10. If I were to change this from true to false, now all of a sudden it says it can't find value 100. So what have I done? The parameter is named is sorted and my column is sorted. But because this is a contact, I don't want it to give me the closest match. I want it to give me an exact match. So I don't want it. I think a better name for the parameter would be closest match and then true or false. But, I didn't get to name it. So this is the functionality of it. And we can tell that it's working because I can add 100 records and look at that. Now it's returning ID 100 and sure enough, went too far. We have 100 records. All right, so let me bring that back down to 10 so we can see it all. All right, so now we have, it's missing again. If I do 10, 10 shows up here. All right, well, this is not very fun. It's just finding the search key and returning it. So I want to make this a little bit better. So I want to copy this function. For me to copy this function, I want this cell to stay the same, and I want my range to stay the same. So I'm going to make these by clicking F4. I'm going to make this the absolute column and the absolute row. And I'm going to do the same thing again, F4. And now my range is locked in as absolute. And now I can copy this down. And so it's giving me all the same information. The only thing I need to change is the index. So now you'll see first name is Dwayne. And then we can just keep changing those indexes to get the right information. All right, so now we got Dwayne Learman. All of the contact information is showing up right here. I put some conditional formatting in so that when all the information is correct, it shows us, it highlights it for us. So we can come up here and we can change this to 6. Changes it right there. We can do our 100 records again, and we can do 75. And sure enough, it gives us 75. So again, now, if I were to do 101, it tells me that it can't find it. Let me change to the functions themselves. As you can see, all of these lookup functions look identical, except for it's returning a different index. And so we're looking for the same search key, searching the same range, and then all we're doing is returning a different index. And that's how we build out this function. And in the next video, VLOOKUP function part 2, we're going to see what happens if we search for a first name instead of the ID.